all of that money, and I tell people this in this conversation, if I walked out of here at 58 and a half, right, exhausted all of my days and earned all of the money, right, if it was $1 billion, all billion of those dollars would not buy me a second of time.
Welcome to the BadAssDads podcast. KDH here on the microphone. It's been a minute, but we are in the Iron Yeti studios once again. And we got Devin. Hold on a second. We have Professor Devin McGinty. Newly minted black belt.
Newly minted. Yes, sir.
Hey, okay, let's just start there. Sorry, I know we got a ton of other things we want to talk about, but let's just start. First of all, I was hurt. Well, not really hurt. I was sad that I wasn't able to be there. I was out of town. But
yeah, I'm bummed you missed it too.
Yeah, but tell us about getting your black belt.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it still is like tears on embarrassing when people refer to me as professor, I guess. But it was a long time, 17 years, a lot of hard work, a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, there's so many people that were integral in that journey and people to thank. Obviously Justin and Chris and everyone at the pit, all that stuff. I mean, it's certainly, it's one of those things where it's an accomplishment that you wear by yourself, but it's not an accomplishment that you gain alone. It's impossible to earn any belt by yourself. I mean, it takes at least one training partner,
right? Yeah,
so having everybody there and throughout the years and learning all that, learning what I've learned, learning how to navigate jiu-jitsu with, my, I guess, lack of athleticism and learning what works for me, what doesn't work for me. And then when we opened the pit, learning to actually teach and be a good teacher. Yeah. That was, I mean, it's all part of the journey, man. And
so now you've mastered all of jiu-jitsu.
Yes,
basically.
Yeah. Well, clearly, I mean, I have a black belt on me, so obviously that's the case. I mean, it was deemed so.
What did Justin say? Like your journey actually begins now, or something like that? Yeah,
that's when the learning starts. Yeah, it really is. I mean, and it's and I think that and for me, like obviously it's an accomplishment, but it's just another step in the journey. I mean, it's obviously carries significance, but it's just another step. And that's how I'm going to look at it. I mean, so I guess maybe it hasn't really sunk in yet, or it's still surreal, or
do you sleep with it? I mean, is it in the bed with you?
Well, I thought about it, but I don't want to get all tangled up, or that'd be my luck. I'd get wrapped around something and cut the circulation off, and right. I don't know. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, what an amazing season. One of the things that's happened, I mean, this is our 101st episode of BadAssDads. And, I feel like we've had conversations here, catching guys at different times, I think one of the things you taught me in jiu-jitsu is that so much of the game is won or lost in the transitions. Mm-hmm. And, it's when you find that little bitty opening and you make your move to close the gap or whatever, that's when you win the position or not. And transitioning is so incredibly important. And here we are, so many transitions, and really for both of us, but yes. We're going to focus on you today in transitions in life. So let's talk a little bit about this. So we're talking about transitions from, in the near term,
yep.
Leaving a career.
Yes, sir.
Leaving a state where you've basically lived your entire life.
My entire life.
And I know Paul is going to be upset about me saying this, but you have a child who's going to be 18 soon.
Yep.
So that's another transition that is happening here.
We may want to edit that out.
I'm not going to say the whole 1880.
Yeah, she still hasn't forgiven you for that.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about, starting over.
Yeah, starting over. Yeah. So like you were mentioning, so I guess we'll just break this down. So yeah, I'm leaving career of police work, 21 years, a little over 21 years, not including the time I did it as a reserve. But yeah, walking away from that, retiring, I guess. I mean, there's different ways to look at that, but walking away from that, and not even walking away from it because I have something lined up, because I don't know what it is I'm going to do. And that's exciting. It's terrifying. It's all of the things that you think it would be. And so, yeah, like it's crazy. I mean, it is, I think it is actually crazy. I think is these conversations I've had with people over this, that word has come up numerous times.
Right.
And honestly, I can't agree more.
Right. Well, and I mean, for 21 years plus, I mean, it has been your career,
Yep.
your identity. And this is one of the things, a conversation that we had, I don't know, over a few gin and tonics,
Maybe. Yeah.
But it was, and I think Mikey was one that brought it up. I mean, it wasn't just that you wore the uniform. It was almost like your entire family.
Yeah.
And the effect that it has on your children as well.
Yes.
I'm a law enforcement officer's son, or daughter, or, spouse. I mean, and so, all that has happened in the last year, and even more than that, it's, this is not just a transition for you.
Right. And I think that's something that people from outside of this career don't necessarily understand or appreciate, is how impactful this job is on really all your relationships. Obviously, in your small circle, your wife and your kids, it has a huge effect on that. I mean, there's not very many occupations where when your person leaves for their day of work, that there's any consideration like, hey, this might be, God forbid, this may be the day. And it's not even just the possibility of them, losing their life in line duty. I mean, injuries, the impact of just events that they deal with, whether it be, trauma, all those things, all that stuff is a factor in, and it's a hard thing as a law enforcement officer to not bring that home. I mean, there's a really, really treacherous waters to navigate. And I mean, I've been lucky and blessed through my career that I haven't had a lot of that, I guess. I mean, not a lot of critical incidents, a lot of gross and, traumatic things.
Sure.
But I've been lucky and blessed that I've been able to keep that at work. And obviously my position as an academy instructor the last 9 years has helped, because I'm not responding to calls.
Right.
But I'm, I still, obviously still have connections, and I still talk to guys that are dealing with that stuff. And so through, they call it secondary trauma or vicarious trauma, dealing with that, through them, and not taking that home is hard to do.
Well, and I can imagine, just knowing you, that when one of your graduates, I don't know what you call them, when they're out there and a critical incident or something happens, part of you is there going, hey, could I have done something better to help them? And you're walking through that either directly with them or indirectly with them through that whole process, because I mean, it's in your DNA. That's just who you are.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it's hard because, when on this job and you hear of guys getting injured or involved in a critical incident, obviously it a lot of times it makes the news. So a lot of times I hear about it first on social media,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And then the department obviously doesn't release that information. So it's always a scramble of reaching out. Hey, do we know who it is? Do we know? Obviously, and having been an academy instructor for as long as I have been, and as many recruits as I've brought through that academy, like those are all people I've relationships with, and they're people I know, and there's, I mean, it's upwards of, around 800 recruits that I've trained. So of course the likelihood that it's going to be one of these, and I say kids because they're kids, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be one of these kids that's involved in that, and that's that. It's that moment where your heart stops a little bit because you're like, oh my gosh, is everyone okay? Even if it's a shooting or something, are they okay? Are they going to be okay handling this? Like, this is it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that moment of and just because you know them or don't know them doesn't change the severity and the tragedy of the whole event. But obviously, people that you have a relationship with, those things strike a chord with you more so than somebody you don't know, right?
Sure. Yep.
Naturally. And so it's scary.
Yeah. Well, I want to really get into just reinventing yourself, and that whole concept of starting over. I'm gonna tell you my interpretation of your world, in that I have so much appreciated it, is I do not feel that you are leaving this career out of spite, out of hate, out of anger, or anything like that. There's a tremendous love, respect, and everything for your career that you have, and it was really just a timing thing. And so I'm just wondering, and I'm gonna give you what I think the answer is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think one of the challenges is answering the question. So why are you leaving?
Yeah.
And people want to have something they can grab a hold of. They want to be able to go, well, I'm pissed off because of this, or I'm mad about this, or I got to better that over there, or the grass is greener. And that's not how it is.
No. And that actually made this decision kind of awkward, because you're exactly right. Like, I have nothing but love for this career. This career has given me and my family a fantastic living. And this career has been good and kind to me. There's a lot of guys that are in this job or leave this job and are not in a good place, right? Because this job will chew you up and spit you out if you let it, right?
Yep.
And so I'm not in any way there. Like, I still love what I do. I still love where I work. I love the people I work with. We have a phenomenal time at work. We bust each other's balls unrelentingly, and we have a great time. It's just, and it's a hard thing to explain. It's just time,
mm-hmm.
right? And I kind of liken it to, when a professional sports star retires, right? And when they're at that point where they obviously still love the game, and it's just time. Like, some of them, it's at the pinnacle, and maybe they've achieved everything that they've set out to achieve, whatever it is. You just know it's time, right? And they want to still do it, but maybe their skill set is not where it used to be, right? All those things are very, 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 very similar to this, right? Like, I mean, obviously I'm not at the peak of my game, right? I'm getting older. The memory is fading, and there's things I find myself struggle with.
That's just because of a little bit of what happened last night.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe. So, and I think it's an important time for self-reflection. And I think that's something about this job too, is when it's time, right? And self-reflecting, like, if I stay, right, what is that going to look like, right? If I stay, are my relationships with the people I work with going to deteriorate because in my mind I'm done, and I'm not present. I'm not giving them my full effort, my full potential. And I don't want that to be the case, right? I certainly don't want it to be the case that when, for me specifically, I'm training recruits, and that's something that I take very seriously and is very important to me. And I don't want to be the guy that's just going through the motions where I don't care. And that's a hard thing. Like that is a thing that I've felt at times, right? Down, and I don't want that to become a common thing, and in my job, it's the same thing every 6 months. And it's very easy to just be like, oh, here it is again. Oh, here it is again. And you get minimal effort,
Well, and once again, this is my interpretation of it, but it feels like it's been an unbelievably fulfilling career for you. And, we've seen plenty of people use, athletics, in professional sports. We've seen plenty of guys that have hung on too long.
Yeah.
And then, we remember they were in their prime. We see these final years going, why did you come back? I want to remember you this way. And it can tarnish things. And so I love that it's almost like the way I'm interpreting this once again is you're leaving at the top of your game. And so I love that you're willing to do that. And it's hard because, when I've had people, I'm in a similar scenario, transitioning out of a business and that I've been in for 22 years. And so, all these questions have come up. And so I don't want to make it about me, but it was, a question come up. Well, what about this? Or what about this? Why do are you not making enough money? Or is it, what are you gonna do with the future? Or, are you trying to go work for someone else? And it was like none of those things. For me, there was just a part of it that I was feeling like I've just outgrown this. I'm ready to grow in a different direction now. And that's so hard because it's not quantifiable,
Right.
People want to go, yeah, but you're making X number of dollars. Don't you want to? Okay. Yes. But now that fulfillment is not quite there for me. So, don't want to put the words in your mouth, but that's how, I've been feeling. So,
yeah, and I guess one of the difficulties of this is sometimes you feel in a way that you can't exactly describe, right? You don't, maybe it's me, maybe I just don't have the vocabulary, but I don't really have the words to express how I feel, because if I talk about this job, I love this job,
right?
And I find myself talking about it very positively. I mean, obviously I bitch and piss and moan just like everybody does about the job, but it's just a good time,
mm-hmm.
right? And I felt a little bit, I felt a little bit trapped in the sense that my position is a very good, very highly sought after position, and it's as an instructor, I'm insulated from the streets, and I have huge amounts of responsibility. I have all these things that are good, but it's precarious in the sense that they could decide tomorrow, like, hey, you're going back to push big white, right? And so I didn't, or if I was done, like I'm done being an instructor, I'm done with that. I don't have really a lot of avenues of places to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt trapped in the sense, and I don't want to say trapped like it was, like I'm in a cage. It's
right.
That's not what I'm saying, but I didn't really have a lot of options.
There wasn't
right?
a lot of vertical mobility for you.
Exactly.
In the future.
Yeah, there was. I mean, I could, this is the year where we take the sergeant's test, and I'd taken the sergeant's test in the past and clearly didn't pass it, but that wasn't, I didn't want to be a sergeant,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so laterally, that would have been the next step up, right? Laterally, going and being a detective, that is not a job I wanted to do. So I didn't really have a lot of options, and I felt trapped, and I knew that nothing about that was going to change. So it was like, okay, like what, again, keeping your circle small, what is it that you can control, right? And that was the one thing I could control, because obviously I'm here voluntarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody kidnaps me every morning and yanks me out of bed and
right.
throws me in the academy, right? So that was the one thing I could control. And it's like, okay, what does that mean, right? And then it came down to, looking for an exit strategy.
Yeah.
And my plan had always been, we got this thing called the Rule of 80 that passed this year. So your age plus your years of service equal 80, then you're at retirement age, basically. It used to be 55. For me, it was 53 and a half, right? So it was always, okay, 53 and a half, boom, punch my ticket, I'm out, right? And then, but all of that's all drawn from a financial standpoint, right? And so I sat down and I started crunching numbers and looking at what this looked like financially, leaving July 1st, leaving at 53 and a half, at 53 and a half dropping, right, which is basically retiring and then being hired back.
Double dipping.
Basically, yeah, double dipping, right? And then what was that going to look like? And really what it came down to was that all of that money, and I tell people this in this conversation, if I walked out of here at 58 and a half, right, exhausted all of my days and earned all of the money, right, if it was $1 billion, all billion of those dollars would not buy me a second of time. And that's really what kind of the mantra of this was, is it's all about time, right? So, and you're 18 and 80, that was, chirping in the back of my mind. My lieutenant that retired a few months ago, I was talking to him and he was saying that he was at this conference and the speaker was saying that statistically, and this is private sector and public, universal, people who retire at 55 have an average of 18 years in pension, okay? So that means essentially they're alive for 18 years, right? People who retire at 65 have an average of 18 months in pension, and you essentially lose 2 years per year. And like that struck me like a bolt of lightning, man. It was like, oh my gosh, because my plan was always, 55 drop, work till 60. Then the rule of 80 brought that down 2.5 years, right? But I'm like, it's time, man. I don't want to lose time.
Yeah. So I want to we're going to come back to relationships in a minute, but I want to talk about this. This is the last year. Okay, Paul, I'll turn this off or fast forward about 30 seconds. This is the last year that Mikey is in the house.
Yep.
Okay, he'll be a senior this next year. What are some things that you want to be able to do, and then now you're going to be afforded to do with your son because you're going to have some flexibility?
Yeah. There's, I think that that's a tough question. I guess like short-term things like hunting. That's one of the reasons why we chose Texas. We have friends and relationships in Texas, but that's one of the reasons we chose Texas, because it's easier to hunt there. Yeah. And fishing and doing, all that stuff, right? Because again, having opportunity and having availability, right? And I think too, it was important to me to be kind of around Michael a little bit more, because I wanted to be there for his transition, right? Because graduating high school, right, there's a lot of different things that you can do. And Paul and I are not the parents, right, wrong, or indifferent, that are like, you will go to college, right? I've never been like that. I don't see that the value of college right now is necessarily worth the excluding of other choices or opportunities.
I can see that, yeah.
Right? And so I want to be kind of there a little bit more. Like he talked about going into the military, and he's talked about maybe going, there's some community college in there that feed into Texas A&M. Like he's really interested to going to an ag school, or he's really good at like kind of the engineering. Like he took engineering or something in his junior year, this last semester, and did really, really well at it. And so I kind of want to be there helping him transition into that next step, right? And so, and not that I wouldn't be there or available while still working at the police academy. And obviously that's not the case, but again, time is short, right? And if, let's say he does go into the military, right? Like he's to the wind. He could be wherever,
right, for
a minimum of 4 years,
yep,
right?
Yep.
And so kind of squeezing this stuff in, that's important, because it's, even if it's just for the next, year and a half or a year, really, because he did graduated. Yeah. So even if it's just the last year that we squeeze this in and do whatever, like it doesn't matter. Like every minute is a minute.
Well,
right.
One of the things that I've shared with guys is, because I've heard people say, well, when your kids are young, they're not going to remember their first birthday. They're not going to remember all these things. They may not remember if you're okay, it's fine. But you know what? Your memories count too. Right, exactly. I mean, this next year is as much for you also, and you continuing to build on an incredible foundation that you have with your son. And, and I watch you with your dad also. So I got to tell you, it's so much fun to be able to see, those 3 generations of McGinty's. Yeah. I'm sure it's crazy. I'm sure my dad is like, he comes here and is like, my God, what is going on in this place? But I'm telling you, your memories count as well, and what you're going to be able to do over this next year. I hopefully have spoken a blessing on you guys, just saying that I believe this next year is going to be the most connective year for you and your family. Yes, and partly it's going to be forced to, because it's going to be totally new world, totally new environment, and you're going to grow closer together, and that's going to be the springboard for the rest of your lives. But let's talk about relationships now. I mean, we have both had some similar experiences with this, where some people are encouraging, hey, making this transition not only with your career, but also like moving, more than 12 hours away. Some people have just been silent, and some people, to be honest, have not been as encouraging. And they're like, man, you gotta be crazy. Are you kidding me? You could hold your breath for the next 6 years and then get to that golden paycheck. And I see you making a decision that is far more than the money. Now, and I've told you very clearly, having not been where you are, going, there's a lot of ways to make money. That's part of our conversation, Ben. But tell me about how those relationships, and especially those intimate relationships that you have, and then we're going to talk about the internal relationships as well. But both positive and then challenging you, and how it's been for you and Paula. So, well, I mean, it's been difficult. Obviously, because our roots run really deep here, right? I mean, I was born and raised here. Paula was born and raised here. She's like a 3rd or 4th generation native or something, and so it's been hard, because I think the conversations that Paul and I had, because we've talked about this for months and months and months and months. This is not something that, I woke up one day and was like, let's leave, right. And so I think all those people around us were not privy to those conversations. So to them, this is just very much out of the blue, seemed very spontaneous, which I do not consider myself, nor does anybody who knows me consider me a spontaneous person. And so it was very shocking to them. Like, again, like, oh my gosh, like why now? Why this? And so it was hard to navigate that. And it was hard to defend. It was hard to defend the perception of us not thinking this through. Yeah. Right. So well, and let me say this real quick, because I think one of the challenges that I've had as well is people they're wanting, give me the logical A, B, C, D. Here's why you're making this, and it's so much deeper. Right. It's so much deeper than that. Yes. And some, like you were talking about, it's a feeling, and you can't really put your finger on it, and I don't have the vocabulary to mention it, but it's that area that you're going, okay, no, I'm not pissed off about this. No, I'm not that. No, okay, money. Okay. I mean, yes, it's a little bit this. Oh yeah, I can get a different house. I mean, But that's not really it. There's something so much deeper. I don't know. I mean, spiritual almost, you know, that you're going, this is something for us.
Right. And yeah, it was, cause, and this is what's funny is some of the pushback we've gotten, it has been questions financially. And I will immediately surrender. This is like, I'm not leaving this job because I'm going to be better off financially for doing it. Like, clearly that's not the case. And so I am walking away from money, and that's a hard thing for a lot of people to kind of reconcile, right? And I'm not saying it's easy for me to reconcile.
Sure.
And so, but it's not about money, right? Like, it's just not. And you know, in explaining to guys, this is one of the interesting things too, explaining to guys on this job, right? And I think it was Sean in one of the podcasts talked about the golden handcuffs, right? Because it's really how this job gets you, is financially. It's very easy to make a lot of money on this job if you want to put in the time, put in the work, and be gone or whatever. You can make a lot of money on this job, right? So guys get stuck, and so being fortunate enough that through, you know, different things at play throughout this decision, we were financially able to make this leap.
Right.
And so explaining that was hard. And then the question always, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I don't know. You're going to help Kevin and Gretchen remodel their kitchen. Yes, we're going to. Yeah, exactly. I may be remodeling your kitchen. I may be remodeling my kitchen. Yeah, I don't know. And I joked about, you know, I'm like, I don't know, I'll go down there and sell drills at Home Depot, right?
Right.
And so I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is I'm going to do. I know, at least in the short term, I'd be okay having a job where I didn't have a lot of responsibility, right? Having a job that carries a responsibility that I've had for all these years, I'm okay to not do that for a little while. And so, I mean, that's not my long-term plan for sure, but I'd be okay with that, right?
Yeah.
You know, going to being, you know, joke the greeter at Walmart, or, you know, Paul even said this jokingly, and it really actually struck a chord. You know, I might go down there and get a job selling RVs, because I love RVs.
Yeah.
And I love talking to people, and, you know, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see.
I love it. Well, you know, I haven't used this with you, but you know, one of the things that's been helpful for me is to understand that when people are coming and they're sharing their concerns, there is a loss that we're both experiencing. They're experiencing it, and that is great. I mean, because that means they really do care. They love us, but I also have to understand that they're looking at things through the lens of their world,
right?
And I think that's what's hard, because now they want me to explain something that will make sense in their world when, you know, it may not.
Yeah.
And
one of the things that I have found interesting in this process that I didn't expect is that through the conversations and through explaining myself, explaining these decisions and answering these questions, it's given me the opportunity to reflect on some things, and I think there's some things that were brought up that maybe I didn't consider, but it's allowed me to kind of understand perspectives about something like this from other people, and it's kind of allowed me to understand people a little bit more, right? Like, you know, in talking with my brother about this, and you know, me and my brother are different in a lot of ways, and you know, and he was very much, you know, because he's a big picture dude. Like he thinks of the long game and all that, and this does not fit within his, you know, long game perception of me. So he's looking at my life through his lenses.
Yeah.
And so kind of communicating this to him and really making, because he's my brother, like he's of course is concerned, like he's and so understanding how to communicate this to him in a way that he's confident in it, right? Because that's really, because people make decisions, and when they're around people that don't agree with those decisions, it's a hard place to be in. That's a hard relationship to be in. Mm-hmm. So it's important for me, because it's going to happen. It's important to me to do this in a manner that gains some confidence. Yeah. Right. To gain support. Because I don't need his permission, right, obviously. Right. But I do in, a deep level, I need his support on this, and that was, that was something that was hard to do. And it actually, kind of going backwards a little bit, the most important person in this that we had to get on board was Kayla. Because
15-year-old daughter.
15-year-old, exactly. And so in talking about this with her, I mean, you want to talk about like navigating treacherous waters. It was really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, because through discussions, Paula was on board, right? This was honestly as much her idea as it was mine. I didn't have to convince her of anything, right? Michael, if we woke up and I said, hey, Michael, we're going to live out of my truck for a year, yeah, he'd probably be like, ugh, but he'd be like, whatever. Right.
Right.
But Kayla, it was really, really important to me that she be on board. And obviously, given the choice, she would stay, right? She's got friends and like we all do, right? But it was really, really important to me to get her buy-in, and it really, I really had to kind of dig deep to understand her and how I was going to navigate that. And it's been like, and you actually said this, is that through this process, you're going to be closer to your family. And already we're starting to feel that way, because when I talked to Kayla about this, it was like, look, baby, we're all doing this together, right? Nobody's alone in this process, right? We're all, I'm leaving a career of 21 years. We're all walking away from friends, right? We're pulling up our roots that run really, really deep in this city and in this state, and we're moving. We're all in this together. So I don't want you to feel like you are having emotions about this that you're alone in.
Good.
Right.
Yeah,
I really wanted, and I told her too, I said, if, like, understand that this is not something I take lightly. This is not something that I find any kind of, that I relish in this at all. This is very scary for me. I said, because something I want you to understand is, if this turns out to be a bad idea, right? Like, we sit here and talk and we're excited. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Right. This could end up being a terrible idea, and who knows what could happen. Like, obviously I understand that, but I had to tell Kayla, like, look, baby, if this ends up being a terrible idea, it's all on me. It's all on me, and I have to carry that consideration. I have to carry that potential with me in every part of this. So I wanted her to understand that I'm confident enough that this is going to work out good, that I'm willing to take the risk, right? I'm believing that the squeeze is going to be worth the juice, right? And the more we kind of sat and talked about this, and the more we helped her understand that this is a team movement. Actually, a lot more of the buy-in that we got from her, to where, her and Paula are, exchanging Zillow houses on, and talking about this. And I'm not gonna, trust me, we've made her some commitments to sweeten the pot a little bit, like her own bathroom. Like, that's a big thing, right? And I'm fine with that. We're looking at properties with a pool.
Yeah.
We'd love to have a pool. Like, I want a pool, but and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not above bribing my daughter to move across the country. In no way am I above that. So, getting her confident that this is a good thing and it'll be all right. Promised her that we'll fly her friends out on fall breaks or spring breaks, and we'll send her back up here for weekends and stuff. Those are all commitments we made to her to help her through this, because that was how the kids were going to respond and how this was going to affect our kids was the absolute biggest part of this decision. It wasn't financial. It wasn't logistical. It was all about how this was going to be for the kids, 100%.
So let me share this. I believe one of the biggest responsibilities as a dad, as a badass dad, is that we live an inspiring example of peak performance in front of our kids. And part of that is our ability to make a decision. And then, Andy Andrews says, God did not put in us ability to always make right decisions. He gave us the ability to make a decision and then make it right. And so, but it's our ability to take a risk, because guess what? When they see mom and dad take a risk, leave a career, move, whatever, it's going to instill confidence in them to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
And I think this is incredibly important. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to, quit their job, move across. That's not what I'm saying. But I think it's so good for them to see it. Part of for Gretchen and I has been our boys never saw us build our business.
Right.
So literally when we adopted our boys, it was built. It was kind of done,
Yep.
And so now all of a sudden, leaving that and doing some transitions for us, they're getting to see, firsthand. And so I think one of the challenges, and I felt from myself as well, is that, and you kind of use it as well, how do I defend the position of what we're doing? And it almost feels at times like we're on trial.
Right. Yes.
And we're not. We are not on trial.
Right. But that's not the worst thing either.
No, it's
right?
not.
Because I think it's important that you have people in your life that, like you talked about the podcast about the cornerman.
Yep.
It's important to have people in your life that may take a difficult position.
Yes, absolutely.
And make sure, right? Like I to be candid, like when I explained this to Justin, right? Like he was very good at kind of being that corner man and checking in to make sure that I had my I's dotted, my T's crossed, and he was, and he was supportive, but he was also hesitant.
Sure.
and gave me some pushback, and I, and I appreciate that, because I don't think it's good for you to have relationships where people are like, yeah, sure, do whatever,
right.
Cool.
Yep.
Right? That doesn't benefit you.
And there's wisdom in getting counsel.
Yep,
no
absolutely.
doubt about it. So, I wrote it down, but I'd heard this before. But one of the most spiritual things that we can do is to make a decision, and so being able to do that. So, I have two last things I want to ask you about. I want to ask you about walking in. And I don't know how it actually works, but you walking in, I'm imagining you handing in your resignation letter. Okay?
Right.
It's like it's all great in theory. It's all in theory. Oh yeah, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna go fishing, and we're gonna go hunting, and we're gonna be out there. We're gonna be getting a suntan, and we're gonna make sure our AC works and all that kind of stuff. We're looking for a pool. That's all great, but then that moment when you're like, oh shit, like am I real? Those steps. That, and then I want to talk about being a Renaissance man. I want to wrap up with talking about the two songs.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about like that moment. It's all theory until you
Yeah, well, I can, because as it's evolved at work anyway, because I'm a pretty open person generally, and I'm a pretty open person at work. So as hey, we're putting a house on the market. Oh, hey, I'm probably quitting that kind of came in pieces. So there wasn't a big surprise there. But I will tell you, when I went down to sign my paperwork, right? Because there's forms I had to fill out and all this other stuff. I went down there, so I'm sitting across the table from the gal, and she was I was scared to death. and she was super nice. Like, I was terrified I wasn't filling the forms out right. I was terrified that I was missing something, right? So she was really great, helped me through the whole thing. And then I kind of got to a point, I said, hey, I go, so if something should happen, like catastrophic, in the sale of our house, and I need to stay here, and I still need this job, like, this isn't it, right? Like, this isn't. And it was funny. She's like, well, that's actually up to your command. Like, if something happens and you have to stay in this job, you have to ask them if you can rescind essentially your resignation. So then I had to go back to work and be like, hey, boss. So, and of course that resulted in, threats of bribery and all kinds of other stuff, like, I don't know, what's it worth to you? So, but that was an interesting, like, hey, like, before we get too far into this,
right,
what are my options, right? Yeah. So yeah, that was a watershed moment for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So how was it driving home after all that?
Well, I drove. So I drove. I went there in the morning and then drove to work.
Okay.
And it was surreal.
Yeah.
And it was very and the funny thing about this is I think Paula is I don't want to say struggling, but the idea of me not doing this job anymore is more profound for her than I think it is for me. Like, it was graduation day at the academy, and so I had my uniform shirt hanging on the doorknob so I wouldn't forget it, right? Speaking of getting old and forgetting things. Not being at the top of our game.
Kind of important to have your uniform for graduation day.
Where can I put this where I won't forget it? And so it was hanging there, and she started to get emotional because it probably one of the last times I'll actually put that on.
Yeah,
and, and like doing different things and having police stuff just here and there. And, and there's been several moments where she's gotten emotional about this. And I don't know, because I'm a fairly emotional guy. I mean, I think, I wear my emotions on my sleeve a lot of times, and I don't know if it just hasn't hit me yet, or if I'm in a good place about this, that it doesn't conjure those. I don't know. But she's had a rough spot here or there, and that was one of them. Is when I left there and I called her and said, hey baby, like, I signed the paperwork and this and that, and she was, I could hear it on her voice over the phone, and like, oh my gosh. So
wow. Well, I don't know. I probably had you on the podcast 4 times, 5 times.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And the very first time I called you a Renaissance man, and I thought it would be very apropos to come back to the Renaissance, and you had 2 songs. And hopefully you remember the 2 songs that you share with me that were kind of appropriate for this season.
I know one for sure.
Yeah.
Starting over. Yep.
And Lukenbach, Texas.
And Lukenbach, Texas. Yep.
So talk to us about Starting Over.
So
Stapleton, right?
Chris Stapleton. So we've been talking about this, and we always kind of perceive this as not really financially able to do it, and again was feeling the golden handcuffs, that whole thing. And we were on a plane leaving from Houston, visiting our friends, and it came on, and I heard it, and like a bitch, I sat there in the plane and stuck my head in the window portal and sobbed listening to this song, and because it's, I mean, like, verbatim, it fits so perfectly in this part of our life and this decision to do this, and so it just, I mean, and then I had Paul listen to it, and then we were both on the plane. The top of my mask was all wet from my tears. Like, I mean, not my finest moment,
right,
but
right.
What do you do? And then Lukenbach, Texas has been, that was kind of the song for like the long term, the go nowhere, sell your, ring and buy some faded jeans and go nowhere. And we went to Lukenbach, Texas last summer, up in Hill Country, and it's actually not really a place. It's literally just a post office. but it has, it's a music venue.
Right.
And so, we have a picture of us in front of the Lukenbach, Texas sign at the post office and whatnot. And I mean, that was the dream.
Yeah.
And we're still working towards, because we'd like to have a place up in Hill Country someday. But we obviously, for the kids in their school, we wanted to move into somewhere where they had good schools and whatnot. And so, when the kids have done their thing, we're gonna start looking for land up in Hill Country, and that will be our Lukenbach.
Love it. Well, Professor Devin McGinty, starting over, man. I'm so excited for the adventure. I'm excited that we're going to be able to navigate these waters together.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It'll be great to have, the families up there and have, I think, and I think you're a little bit more used to moving, because you weren't born and raised in Denver.
Right.
So I'll be leaning on you for a lot of stuff, and and hopefully we'll be leaning on each other and going through this journey and this process, and our families can lean on each other, and I think it's gonna be exciting. I can tell you that for sure.
Well, I love it, guys. I tell you what, thank you so much for listening. And this is not the end of Badass Dads. We will continue for sure. We may just be coming from a distance. And so we're going to work on some of the details with that. And we will be getting on a better regular schedule as well. So, hey, have a badass day, be a badass dad, and we are out. Hey, guys, I wanted to thank you so much for listening to the Badass Dad podcast. We are so excited about what's going on in 2021, and we want to encourage you to connect with us. So you can hit us up on the Facebook or Instagram at BadAssDads _podcast is where you'll find us on Instagram. And if you want to hit me directly, it is KDH@BadAssDads.org. KDH@BadAssDads.org. And appreciate you guys. Let's get after it.